Ultrakill, a fast-paced FPS game developed by Hakita and published by New Blood on September 3, 2020. Popular for its high-octane gameplay and blood and gore, spilling all over the screen as you pass through the layers of hell and slaughter anything that moves, or not, if you've been dabbling within the community, you'll start to notice something. This game's player base is gay as fuck. Reference to gay robot sex, Gabriel body pillow, the ultra-queer essay on AO3, the Last Layers sliding being interesting. Those are just some of the most popular examples. But what ultimately piqued my interest on this topic is when I joined the Ultrakill speedrunning community. In case you didn't know, I casually speedrun Ultrakill where I run 1-4 and 4-4 every day until I get a GPU. After I joined the Discord server of the speedrunning community, I curiously checked everyone's profile. Almost every single one of them is trans or at least part of the LGBTQ+ community. So I naturally became curious and started asking questions. That's why, in this video, we'll dive deep into various academic works and cultural studies and try to explain why does Ultrakill have a huge LGBTQ player base. Ultrakill's massive LGBTQ player base actually lines up with how games shape identity and emotion. Psychologist Sherry Turkle, in her book The Second Self from 1984, talked about how computers and games let people experiment with different sides of who they are. She called them mirrors for the mind, spaces where you could test out versions of yourself that might not be safe to show in real life. Decades later, Nick Yee's 2006 study on player motivation expanded on this. Yee identified 3 main reasons people play games: achievement, social connection, and immersion. Under that immersion category, he found something really interesting. Players often use games to explore identity. The avatars we make, the playstyles we choose, all of that can reflect how we see ourselves, or how we want to be seen. For queer players, that kind of freedom hits on a deeper level. Games like Ultrakill don't care who you are. They just hand you the tools and say, go wild. There's no moral system judging you, no character forced to fit in. It's a world where you can express intensity, aggression, and flair without being told you're too much. That sense of freedom, of psychological safety can feel liberating, especially for people used to having their self-expression policed. Then there's Catharsis, or emotional release. The concept goes way back to Aristotle, but in psychology, it's been studied as a process where action helps release pent-up emotion. In gaming, researchers like Shibilsky and others, and later Banks and Bowman, link this to what's called the flow state, that sweet spot where your brain is fully focused, challenges match your skill, and you lose track of everything else. For marginalized players, that kind of flow can be more than just fun. It's a safe way to process anger, anxiety, or stress, and turn it into control. Now there's also the idea of aesthetic resonance, the idea that we're drawn to media that feels like us, even if it's not about us. Researcher Adrienne Shaw, in her 2014 work on queer gaming communities, found that LGBTQ players don't always need explicit representation to feel connected. They often relate to games that echo queer experiences symbolically, through themes like defiance, isolation, or the search for meaning in a hostile world. And finally, Jack Halberstam's 2011 book, The Queer Art of Failure, brings it all home. Halberstam argues that queer audiences are drawn to art that rejects normality. Things that celebrate chaos, excess, and defiance. That's basically Ultrakill in a sentence. The violence, the blood, the religious drama. It's like rebellion was made into an aesthetic. So when you look at all this together, Ultrakill isn't just a power fantasy. Psychologically, it's liberation through chaos, it's identity exploration through performance, it's emotional release disguised as ultra-violence. Ultrakill's queer following reflects how identity, art, and community interact within digital spaces. Culture shapes how we play, what we value in aesthetics, and how we find belonging, and Ultrakill happens to sit at the crossroads of all 3. Sociologist Stuart Hall proposed that media doesn't carry a single fixed meaning. Instead, audiences decode media through their own cultural and social perspectives. That means that the way players see Ultrakill depends on the experiences they bring into it. For queer players, its symbols, blood, angels, rebellion against divine order, can take on meanings of resistance and transformation. What might look like unstoppable carnage to one player might feel like liberation from moral judgment to another. This connects to the idea of subcultural style, discussed by Dick Hebdige in Subculture, The Meaning of Style. Hebdige argued that marginalized groups often use aesthetic excess such as fashion, music, and performance to resist dominant norms. LGBTQ culture especially has long used exaggerated styles as a political and emotional tool. When Ultrakill fills the screen with dramatic violence and over-the-top theatrical voice lines, it mirrors the same resistance through spectacle. The game's aesthetic excess becomes an act of symbolic defiance. Then there's the role of camp, a concept popularized by Susan Sontag. Sontag described camp as celebration of artifice, exaggeration, and irony. Taking what's considered too much, and turning it into power. Modern queer theory reframes camp not as failed seriousness, but as deliberate reclamation. The freedom to be bold, expressive, and self-aware. Ultrakill's stylization fits perfectly into that camp framework. It performs excess as art. Another key factor is how queer communities form online. Research in digital sociology and Mekler and Cray's studies on LGBTQ digital spaces shows that online environments allow queer individuals to construct shared cultural meaning through humor, language, and fandom. Put together, these studies suggest that Ultrakill's queer player base emerged not because the game explicitly set out to be queer, but because its style, tone, and community structure resonate with long-standing patterns in queer cultural expression, reinterpretation, rebellion, and performance. In other words, the reason is simple. Ultrakill speaks the visual and emotional language that queer culture already understands. Exaggeration as resistance, chaos as self-expression, and community as survival. Hang around the Ultrakill community long enough, the Reddit threads, Steam forums, Discord servers, and you'll start to notice the same thing. The game's community feels gay as hell. Get it? Because hell? In one Steam thread, players joke that every Ultrakill player is gay, while others pointed out that so many regulars, especially in the speedrunning and fanart circles, identify as trans or queer. Across all these spaces, the message is the same. It's not about the game being explicitly queer, but how queer players claim it. They remix violence, the irony, the over-the-top energy, and make it theirs. The fandom doesn't just interpret Ultrakill as queer, it performs it. To really understand why the queer community connects so strongly with Ultrakill, I wanted to hear it straight from the people who play it every day. So I reached out to some players from the Ultrakill community on Reddit and on my community server, people who identify as part of the LGBTQ+ spectrum, and asked them a simple question. Why this game? Why does something this violent, this chaotic, resonate so deeply with queer players? I asked them 3 simple questions. What got you into Ultrakill? What do you like about the game? And finally, why do you think Ultrakill has a huge LGBTQ player base? When I asked members of the Ultrakill community what got them into the game, their answers were surprisingly similar. Most people discovered it through online spaces, YouTube videos, and memes floating around social media. That makes sense when you think about it. These are the same cultural spaces where queer people are already active, expressive, and connected. According to Shaw, LGBTQ+ players often enter games not through mainstream channels, but through community recommendation and representation within digital subcultures. And what keeps them playing? Every single person I talk to mentions something about freedom, how the game lets you play however you want. There is no correct way to play Ultrakill. It rewards experimentation, style, and flow. This lines up beautifully with what Ruberg calls queer play, a kind of play that values failure, flexibility, and self-expression over competition or rigid mastery. Ultrakill's fast, fluid movement systems invite players to experiment endlessly, and that kind of openness resonates deeply with queer and neurodivergent players alike. A lot of the interviewees mentioned that the game felt perfect for neurodivergents. That echoes findings by Bopp and others who found that games offering expressive control and creative problem solving can provide emotional regulation and self-affirmation for marginalized players, especially LGBTQ+ individuals and those with neurodivergent traits. And of course, our main question. Why does Ultrakill specifically have such a huge queer player base? Across the interviews, there were a few repeating ideas. First, there's the theme of otherness. Players described identifying with the game's sense of being outcast, transgressive, and defiant. This aligns with queer readings of games that position power and chaos as forms of self-liberation, a way to reclaim control in worlds that often reject you. We also have to mention religious trauma. Many pointed out to Gabriel, the angel boss, as a symbol representing queer struggle against divine authority and moral judgment. Studies like Divan and Squire suggest that players often map their identities onto game narratives, using symbolic conflict as a way to process personal or social trauma. So when queer players face Gabriel, they're not just fighting a boss, they're confronting something deeper, a representation of their personal struggle. And finally, there's community itself. Not only its players, but also the game's developers. People said they stayed because it's welcoming, open, and accepting. Once a few queer players became visible, created a snowball effect where visibility invited more visibility. Sociologist Adrian Shaw notes that once queer representation reaches a critical mass within a fan community, it often becomes self-sustaining, a cultural home where identity and play merge. So when you put it all together, Ultrakill isn't just a game about blood and violence. It offers players the power to express themselves without apology. Also, I found it kind of funny that coincidentally, some of the interviewees started playing Ultrakill because of this specific video by Bumbles McFumbles. I just wanted to mention that. So after I posted that thread asking to interview Ultrakill players in the LGBTQ+ community, the comment section went feral. Some are not comfortable enough to do an interview, so they left their thoughts in the Reddit comments. Here's some notable ones. User Careless Angle noted that it's not Ultrakill, but all indie games tend to have a large community of LGBTQ+ people. And in my opinion, there is some truth to it. I've noticed that a large number of Ultrakill players also play Hollow Knight casually. There's also Undertale and Deltarune, which are games that are known to be welcoming towards members of the LGBTQ community. There's also this comment by user Royal Ad where they said, obviously, gay and trans people such as myself have a primal and insatiable urge to rip and tear through the denizens of hell. Jokes aside, I'm sure there's gotta be a real reason why. I don't have a whole lot of deep insight, but I'm totally willing to answer the question, which may be explained by the previously mentioned concept that is catharsis. Another comment that caught my eye was by Germans Slut. Okay, that's not me, that's their username. They pointed out that small LGBTQ communities tend to form around games that are within the boomer shooter genre, which means Ultrakill is no exception to this. Also, they pointed out that a big part of Ultrakill having a huge LGBTQ player base was not because members of the community got attracted to the game, but because some players came out while they're part of the Ultrakill community. In the end, Ultrakill isn't just a riot of stylistic violence. It's a living, breathing case study in how queer identifies its place, even in the chaos of a game about annihilating machines and demons. From psychology to subculture, and especially through lived experience of its players, the reason for Ultrakill's LGBTQ+ magnetism becomes apparent. It's about freedom, to claim space in a world that often tries to keep you boxed in or silent. For queer players, Ultrakill offers more than emotional release. It's a safe haven and a stage, letting fans see their own struggles and triumphs reflected back in ways both defiant and joyful. Identity, emotion, and the community blur into a glorious mess of memes, mods, text, and solidarity. So the answer to why is Ultrakill so gay is as simple as layered as the game itself. Haha. Get it? Layered because, yeah. When you hand people a world with no rules but the ones they make for themselves, you shouldn't be surprised if the ones who've spent their lives living resisting boxes show up and make something incredible out of it. Ultrakill isn't just claimed by the queer community. It's celebrated, remixed, and reborn by them. And that is it. I hope you enjoyed this video as well. Sorry if the video was delayed for a while. Work piled up, but here it is. Thank you to everyone who participated in the interview. Mint M95, Amber, Delia, Dorado, Watosi, Erika, David, Andy, Port, Laser, and finally, Zoids1. There's other players who also wanted to be part of the interview, but I can only handle so much people. I work alone. Although, thank you for showing your enthusiasm with helping me make this video. If you love my work and would like to support me, you can do it on my Ko-fi page. I am in the mission of getting a GPU and I'd really appreciate the help. Also, don't forget to join the Discord where I host polls to decide which videos I should put out next, such as this one. Follow my socials and my avatar artist socials, which are linked down below. And as always, subscribe if you like eggs. Remember to kill V2.